Hi, everyone. Welcome to Code and Connor podcast. My name is Connor Deeks, CEO of CodeStrap, and I'm joined, as always, with the original CodeStrap himself and CTO, Dorian Smiley. We're going to be bringing you guys the latest and greatest around Palantir, the tech, the company, the community. We'll also be discussing insights on other companies, things happening in the world of AI, but consulting around it, of investing, and any meaningful topic that requires attention. The focus of today's episode is the journey from AI pilot to production and why most companies and individuals are stuck in pilot hell. We're joined today by Kevin Pettit, CEO of Creative Glu. Kevin is a repeat tech founder and entrepreneur who's been building enterprise AI and agent systems for the last 3 years. With his background building enterprise automations, B2B SaaS, and VC-backed startups, he has witnessed firsthand how all three of those have been disrupted by AI. Kevin, welcome to Code and Connor.
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited.
All right, so first thing up on the docket is to recap Palantir's earnings, which was a blowout. A couple highlights with some stats here. Year-over-year growth, Q2 2025 from Q2 2024, 93% U.S. commercial growth, 47% overall commercial growth. That's accelerating up from 71% and 33% respectively. 53% U.S. commercial growth, 49% overall government growth, again, accelerating up from 45 and 45 respectively, and then total revenue growth, 48%. Before I jump into quarterly figures, why don't we state some opinions on where we think this is going and what we think about the numbers themselves.
The numbers are what I've been waiting for. Like, I've been wanting to see a blowout quarter for quite a while. You know, like I felt like last year we were going to see that. We didn't get it, but this year we did. I still think we've got to continue to accelerate growth. You know, it's got to get 50, 60, 70. If you look what like NVIDIA did, you know, you're talking triple digit growth quarters consecutively, you know, for quite a long time. So like, I think that this is amazing. It's a blowout quarter. I don't want it to be anomalous. Like Harp said, I want it to be like the start of even more growth, you know, which is, I mean, great for our business too. Obviously we're aligned with the growth of Palantir that directly affects, you know, our ability to scale. But yeah, it was a blowout quarter. Amazing job. Like, hats off to the whole team over there. We know how hard they're working too. Like, we interact with Palantir quite a bit. And so we see how much they're giving to that company, and it's pretty crazy. So it's obviously showing up in the numbers. So I just hope they can continue to crush it and, you know, can continue to operate at that high level. I know it's hard on people. So it's like, you know, I think they do have to continue to hire. I believe they mentioned they're going to continue to hire in the earnings call. Hopefully that takes some of the pressure off and they can, you know, regroup and then keep at it and accelerate. You know?
Yeah, one thing Cart mentioned was around, you know, more. So there's the need for a direct sales team. Again, Carp said they do have one, but it's maybe not their full focus because they're not going to be like every other tech company that's heavily scaled that group of individuals. He called out that they are seeing referrals from existing customers where they're talking to other people. So word of mouth is spreading. And obviously there's probably some level of FOMO here where if you see blowout capabilities and huge return on investment at premier clients, well, other ones of similar size or in similar industries are gonna come a knocking. And I think if you have the base, you know, I don't think anything speaks more highly than when an existing executive of one customer of Palantir speaks to another and says, no, this is real. This actually works. But you're right to the point where the valuation is so large that we need to be seeing even higher growth, which is going to put a lot of pressure on the individual people inside Palantir. And they are already very, very hardworking. And potentially stretched thin. So interesting to see where this goes and if they can either continue this trajectory or even accelerate it even further.
You know, it's interesting. You said the valuation is really high. I mean, do we know? I don't have this offhand. Do you know what the revenue multiple is on them right now? I think it's
like 80.
Yeah, it's trending towards 100, but yeah,
I'm trending towards right. It's basically never a multiple that high. I don't know if it's ever been seen before, but like I saw someone break it down 2 days ago and they had comparisons to like NVIDIA and others. And Palantir is just way off on its own on the revenue multiple. It's like really
well, I mean, it sounds crazy, but I mean, if you look at like their margin growth and their growth rate, like if you take the rule of 40 for them, right? They're at like a 94, right? It was 48%, I think, year over year growth and 46% year over year margin, which means that they're not sacrificing margin to grow, which is like insane to do. I think that's like the hard thing to be done. And I think that if you have, a company that large that is growing both their, private and public business, like their government business and their commercial business, then yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to understand, you know, I thought from all the things that I'm hearing, I was kind of, I wasn't surprised at all. I feel like there's a pull where a lot of, a lot of executives and things are already past that pilot stage of 2024 and like going into starting to build more scaled systems, and all roads lead to Palantir when you think about that for the larger companies. So, my big surprise, I think, in reading some of the numbers, and I haven't digested all of them, but is that I think that there was even shift further towards, the revenue mix was actually shifted further towards government than commercial, which is kind of opposite of what I was feeling and seeing and hearing, which is like I thought that the commercial growth was gonna really
I
be
think
the blowout.
I think this quarter the commercial sales exceeded government for the first time. Pretty sure. So am I wrong on that, guys? Like
No, I don't. I think the well, I'm not sure if it's it depends on customer size or revenue mix. I'm pretty sure that the revenue mix has actually shifted further towards government in this.
U.S. commercial revenue growth, they're up to 306 million for the quarter and 426 million for government. So government's still higher, but I don't know exactly the mix between quarter over quarter. I'd have to go do the math on that.
But the growth rate, I mean, U.S. commercial is the thing that's growing the fastest, 93%, year over year. So that seems to be, I think that'll be where the majority of the long-term growth comes from if we look at it. That said, they announced a $10 billion consolidation in the government space recently, but it's unclear, like, what is that net new spend? And like, because they're consolidating contracts, like, is there net new in there for Palantir? Are they, getting a cut of these consolidated agreements that they're now acting as the prime or something? It's unclear there. But what is clear is 93% growth in U.S. commercials trending in the right direction. That means like we could potentially see triple-digit growth coming here shortly. And they have a lot of room to run. To your point, both of your points, like at a certain point, every company is just going to say Palantir is the default, bring it in here. Like that's how it is with a lot of technologies. At a certain point, everyone just sort of follows. They're just like, you know what, we're done arguing about this. Everyone's using it. Let's get on this now. So like, I think at a certain point, and if you look at their penetration inside the Fortune 500, it's relatively small. It's actually really small. So we've got a lot of room to run here. The challenge is like, let's talk a little bit about the TAM SAM there, because like no one's really done a good TAM analysis for Palantir, and it's difficult to wrap your arms around because a lot of times you're throwing in traditional enterprise software and AI. But I think there's some clear things we can cut out when we do a TAM SAM with Palantir, and it's like, well, they're not an infrastructure company, right? So like they're not going to be AWS, they're not going to be Azure, they're not going to be GCP. They have yet to enter the consumer product space or physical product space. So that you're going to cut out a lot of the things that if we were to benchmark them against some of the incumbents, they're not going to have the same TAM that those incumbents have, because we're talking about, they do software plus infrastructure plus consumer plus, physical device manufacturing, et cetera. So like, if I were to look at the TAM, it's difficult to quantify, but I would say like I have to subtract those things, and then we're looking at pure enterprise software plays. And in that market, you have things like Oracle. Well, Oracle's got infrastructure too. Maybe Salesforce. Maybe Salesforce is the only, like if we were to pick the benchmark, the pure software play. But I'd be interested to get your guys' thoughts on like thinking about what's in the, if we were to compare the TAMs to an incumbent, what incumbent would that be? And then like, what are your thoughts on the total addressable market that Palantir could see?
Yeah, so let's start with the definition. Yeah, TAM is total addressable market, total market for Palantir, maximum market potential, which, like you said, is hypothetically all of software. I think you can actually, because they have the forward deployed engineering, you can bring in IT consulting partly. But I did some research. Again, this might be total swag, but from a couple different resources, software currently, which includes consumer and enterprise, is somewhere around 750 billion. today, which is going to continue to grow, and then consulting is basically the same. So if you could put it all in one bucket, you're looking at like 1.5 trillion as the
So gotta kind of take consumer off the table. At this
exactly.
stage. Yeah.
So, but then you got to cut it out. So you're getting lower and lower. And you're right. Salesforce is probably the only other pure play software comparison. And the question is, can Palantir serve all of software? It is a platform, which means you can build atop of it. You could build a Salesforce replacement. We are, but can they actually achieve any of that? That's where you get down to the next layer, which is an addressable market and obtainable market. But before I jump there, Kevin, any thoughts?
Yeah, Palantir is a hard one, right? Like you almost have to break it up into different business lines. Like I was thinking about this the other day. What if AIP was its own standalone business, right? And if you had that, and I obviously don't know, but if I was to guess that AIP is driving a lot of the commercial side of the revenue, and so if you're like, which means that there's probably, and my probably lived experience is that there's a lot of demand for thinking about, the AI side of the implementation and not just the infrastructure and the other software pieces. So if you're just thinking that, okay, so AIP is, you know, responsible for a majority of the growth of the commercial side. They're going to do 4 billion in revenue, I think, or over 4 billion, I think, in 2025. Let's just say a quarter. So you're talking about 1 billion in revenue associated with AIP at a 15x multiple. You're talking about AIP is already like a $15 billion or $20 billion company, right? And if you're talking about that, then I'm comparing AIP specifically to AI platforms like AI automation platforms, like we heard the recent news with N8N coming out at a 2 billion, a 2 billion valuation. I think that was a whisper number or something, but like it's like, is AIP, uh, 10x better than an N8N? I would probably say yes, right? But it gives you a different lens to say, okay, well, how much room does AIP have to run? Because if you think about, okay, I saw some number that was like there's like 4.4 trillion in expected corporate productivity that's going to happen through AI, right? And if you're talking about 4.4 trillion, and AIP is going to, even if they just are right now is taking a small portion of the Fortune 500, they still have the option to expand to Fortune 500 and then go down market. What percentage of the 4.4 trillion in productivity gained is actually going to be due to something like AIP, which is taking it the last mile?
It's hard to quantify, right? Like we don't know yet.
Yeah.
That's what makes this TAM discussion so difficult, is like, we don't know what companies are willing to spend on these efficiency gains from AIs. And that is not really factored into the expected growth of the enterprise software market yet. So it's like, if it's 4.4 trillion in growth or savings, however you want to look at it, like that's a massive number. Yeah. I mean, like, we don't know. I mean, that the literal TAM for Palantir could be trillions,
Yeah. It's like, well, would corporates spend $1 trillion to get 4.4 trillion in growth? Probably.
Probably. It's difficult to say though. And a lot of that also depends on like the economic, sort of macroeconomic conditions. But if we look at like the enterprise incumbents now, and if we look at Salesforce, I think what's their revenue? 34 billion, something like that. We in this Salesforce's annual revenue numbers. I think it's around 34 billion. Maybe it might be lower than that actually. Because what we want to do is try and forecast like where does the revenue growth taper off based on what enterprises are willing to spend on software. And I still feel we have to look solely at enterprise. I guess that also includes consulting though, because they do the forward deployed engineering. So if we were to look at like an Accenture, for example, they're publicly traded. We could look at what their annual revenue was.
So Salesforce 2024 revenue was 35 billion. 25 is trending towards 38 billion.
Okay. And what about Accenture? Where are they at?
Give me a second. I mean, you'd have to parse Accenture across different.
It's true, because there's things Accenture doesn't do in there.
Right.
But is software and like, I think the difference is with AI, at least with the, the clients that I'm talking to is that the perception is so different that they don't perceive AI like software. It's like a tool to get an outcome, and it's much more. Whereas, like, if you think about a software budget, it's actually just a line item that you have to pay to keep the lights on. And when you think about AI as a tool to achieve an outcome, then you're not thinking in the same part of your brain as just like a software cost item or something like that, right?
I agree. I think that's where their forward deployed engineering services have been really valuable for companies, at least at this stage. Getting an outcome with AI definitely requires like boots on the ground experts who can come in and apply the tools correctly. Palantir has a great toolkit, but you still need people who know how to apply it. And so I think the FDE model is, and the service fees they're collecting there is like where that's being represented in the revenue numbers. But where's Accenture at on annual revenue?
65 billion for their last fiscal year.
Do we know what portion of that is technology services related, or do they not separate it? I gotta have platforms in there
initially.
Okay.
Should we ask Grok?
Yeah, maybe.
Do you guys use it? Do you guys use Grok? You guys use ChatGPT? What is it? What is it then?
I use ChatGPT. I'm mostly on ChatGPT right now for these kind of like run of the mill research questions, but we also use our own AI now. We're using Vickie, which is actually better. Like I'm getting a lot better results from Vickie because we're able to leverage Google's search index under the hood. So like what I'm seeing is the limitation and a lot of the effectiveness of the AI agents is the quality of the search results. And we're able to build custom search engines around specific types of questions we ask. So like I build market research search engines that are limited to specific websites and timeframes, for example, and our agent that produces those reports does that. So anyway, long story short, we use Vickie and we use ChatGPT mostly. Whatever, we'll just call it 70 billion. And like, if we add in Salesforce, because Accenture typically is an SI for Salesforce, like
They're one of them, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they implement SAP, they implement Oracle, they implement.
That's another good one to look at. What's SAP's revenue? Because that is definitely something I think Palantir will end up cannibalizing some of, if as evidenced by our last episode with Kavanaugh, where we're deprecating a lot of this shit.
So SAP's revenue was 34 billion. Oh, that's
Okay.
zero.
Oh, that's true. What do you got, Connor?
That's what I'm seeing.
34 billion.
Yeah.
Okay. Now we're getting to some numbers now. If we figure, 150 billion, just in those, the handful of enterprise, and it drops off quickly, right? You go from a Salesforce to a Snowflake or something that drops off dramatically. So you start to see this like long tail of other incumbents. But if we were to say 150 billion in the major players for enterprise software plus services, that gives Palantir quite a lot of room to run. If we figure they're at, I think they're projecting 4.5 billion this year in revenue, somewhere like that.
Yeah, something a little under 4.5, I think.
That we figure a revenue multiple on top of that. They probably top out at 40 or 50 billion in revenue. Like if I were to think of a 5-year trajectory, if they can hit that,
Yeah.
But let's just say 10x current revenue 5 years. Which I think, did Carp say 10x revenue in 5 years on the earnings call?
You said 10x something. I'm not sure if it was within 5 years, but there was a mention of it.
I thought he said 5 years. Or I thought he said 5 years. Like it's where he did. But I'm not going to put words in his mouth. But let's just assume it's 5 years. What's the CAGR, right? I think I ran this the other day, and it was like 58% is the CAGR to 10x the revenue in 5 years. Something you could ask Grok, it'll tell you. But yeah, like if we assume a 58% CAGR, that seems achievable for them.
Do you think that in order to achieve that, like triple digit growth, consecutively, that they actually have to go down market to do that? Or do you think that it's truly they could just stay in Fortune 500 and expand because there's so much room to run there? Where is the where?
Oh, I think they could stay in enterprise and achieve those numbers for sure. Because you got to figure Salesforce and Salesforce primarily gets the bulk of its revenue from its enterprise base. I think that's the same across most software companies that are servicing the enterprise space. Salesforce also has a long tail of small business, but my understanding is that it's the top customers that represent the bulk of the revenue. I do think Palantir would have to push down market though. I don't know if it could solely be, the enterprise space. It's a good thing to look at, like what percentage of revenue is coming from the SMB space for these companies to understand if Palantir would need a strategy to push down market, or could they reach those numbers just in the enterprise space?
I think you have to go down market. And then if you're thinking 5 years out, the level of disruption of small players becoming big players, we talked about that a while ago.
That's true. Yeah.
They are to a degree, right? They have Palantir for Builders, which is the smaller cap company play where you can have an entry point or a price point that's more palatable to a smaller company. And when I say smaller, I mean sub-billion or maybe close to $1 billion. I'm not talking about the $10 million company down the street. So there has to be an element there.
Yep.
So Salesforce revenue mix between enterprise versus SMBs is estimated 30 to 40% for SMBs.
That's a substantial portion of revenue for sure. So yeah, they're gonna have. If looking at that, I would say yes, for sure. They're gonna have to push down market in order to reach these numbers. Now, this doesn't account for like the growth in maybe AI and the consulting services there that start to come out of companies needing to adopt AI and how AIP fuels that growth strategy. I do think that's naturally constrained by the number of people you can hire and train, though. Like there's going to be a natural bottleneck in there. Like you literally can't make FDEs right now by just putting them through a 6-week course. The platform is huge. It takes quite a lot of time for people to master it. And I think when you're talking about something as complicated as like how do you implement AI within an enterprise, like that's not a first year FDE problem in a lot of cases. So like there's going to be some constraint on the services growth, but pushing down market seems to be important. And to your point, Connor, like those little companies become big companies, and they actually propel your growth. Like I saw things where like Lyft was spending over $300 million on AWS. That's one customer that went from a startup to 300 million in spend in 5 years or something. So it's like these kind of these growth stories I think are super important. So I definitely think the SMB space will be important. That's something where we all play too. These are customers that we're enabling on Foundry. I could see that being important for the growth model. But if we look at the service addressable market, so like just because we come up with a TAM, and let's just say the TAM 700 billion, related to your point, Connor, about the total consumer and enterprise space. If we say 700 billion plus AI, that's a conservative number, I think, right? Like that's if we say that's the TAM, what's the service addressable market in there from Palantir? And that would exclude consumer at this stage. If we look at purely enterprise, we don't have a number on that. Let's cut it in half. Let's just say 350 billion is the service addressable market.
Well, yeah. Well, another limitation would be geographic, right? Well, they obviously don't service any of the West adversaries, which is a good thing. The second is European AI regulation. Like we've talked to friends over in Germany and Switzerland and whatnot. A lot of the benefit of AI cannot be realized because if certain efficiency gains can result in displacement of your human capital, and that doesn't fly in Europe. So like, are you going to invest in something where you can't realize the benefit? Probably not. So you have a limitation there as well.
Didn't their commercial revenue in Europe shrink last quarter? I did Glazer say that on the call. Again, could be wrong. I know it's at least flat. Like it's not growing very fast.
Yeah, there are political headwinds there too, right?
Exactly. We're seeing customers even talk about ripping it out due to some of the political stuff. So like, let's just enter this. So they're going to have headwinds in international. We might want to, we take that off the table. We take off the table countries that they're not friendly to. Like China's not going to be a market that are even going to offer the service in. So we were at 350 billion, taking consumer off the table. I don't know where that shrinks it to, or just say we'll call the 50% haircut all of those things. Just say 350 billion for the math. What is the service obtainable market of that 350 billion? Because they can't get it all, right? They're not gonna take 100% of that market, guys. So what is that realistic obtainable number in achieved in 5 years? Off that 350 billion.
I mean, this could either be conservative or liberal, but like another 50% haircut at least, right?
Yeah. So 150 billion.
Yeah. So if the obtainable market is, what is that, 175? There we go, 135 billion.
Yeah. 75.
Now you got to go get it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, ain't nothing to it but to do it, right?
The hard part is how do you actually go from, let's say they could go from 4 billion to, and I'm going to be more conservative, I'm going to say 50 billion is what they could actually achieve. So
Yeah.
I think I don't think you going to 175 billion in 5 years, just the scaling the company to service that seems impossible. Uh,
On their own.
on their own. Yeah, 100%. If they were to do this on their own in the current growth model without a direct sales force and not scaling headcount massively, even though they use AI internally everywhere, they use Foundry everywhere to run their business, scaling from 4 to 175 billion, I'm going to say that's impossible. 50 billion would be incredible, right? We're talking massive growth, over 10x revenue growth. How do they do it? And to your point, can they implement partners and partner networks to get closer to that 175 billion to take the load off, right? Maybe that's where the scale really comes from over the next 5 years. But I'd be interested, Kevin, you work with Palantir. We also work with Palantir, but Kevin, I'd be interested in your thoughts on like, what is the role customers could play both in pushing down, or partners could play both in pushing down market and opening that revenue stream, along with scaling sales and managing customer relations and all that kind of stuff.
Well, I think that the biggest blocker to scaling that is just understanding how to navigate the platform, right? And I think that like having an open source strategy so that you can just get more people building in it is required, because you just won't have the hands to be able to understand the tech enough to get uh 10x, let alone 100x or whatever you get to get the, right?
Yeah.
You're going to need people to understand it. And even if we assume, I like to be aggressive, we assume that every person is going to have 10 agents running underneath them, to orchestrate all that, you're still going to need a lot of people. So I think that that one critical factor is going to be just getting, opening up the ability to understand the tech stack and being able to build on it is one. The second is, I think, is just being able to have that that mix between strategy and enablement, because you need to be able to give people the guiding rails as to what they need to do, what steps they need to take to get from point A to point B. And at the end of the day, it's the biggest inhibitor to adoption is just going to be, can people embrace it and actually implement it and actually, bring it into the day to day, into the day to day execution of the operations. And the companies aren't going to be able to do that for themselves, even if they all said, "Hey, I want to sign up for Palantir tomorrow." They're all going to look at a complex tech stack and say, "Well, what is the best way to do it?" Even if they can understand the end state, figuring out what is step one, what is the first department, what is the first use case that we should do, and how do I ensure that. I think the most important thing to real rapid adoption within an organization is the concept of leverage. Like, you need to be like, the first thing that I do should provide maximum leverage to the second project that I want to take on, to the third project I take on, because it's a learning curve for everyone, right? So I think if you can solve the open source, get more people understanding the tech, and you can solve the how do you scale up just the enablement, the change management, the whatever you want to call it, right? The ability to just say yes and make that easy. But there's a lot to do there. It's not like, I mean, that's not just a Palantir problem. That's an AI industry. That's like everyone's problem right now.
I mean, Connor's in this space every day. So Connor, why don't you tell us a bit about the how you see enablement being foundational to the scale that they need to get?
Well, yeah, I think enablement is vital, right? Because there's this big trend away, and this is happening. You can see it with like big consulting, Accenture struggling. Like, why are we gonna, if everybody's learning at the same time, why am I gonna take my precious resources of investment dollars and outsource this capability that everyone needs to learn? Again, it can be in Foundry and AIP, or just more generally, you need to learn how to use AI tools. Well, if you're going to do that inside your four walls, maybe you just keep the money inside your four walls by hiring very strong expert level individuals who are willing to enable a larger workforce. Therefore, most of your investment dollars stay inside your four walls. Then you get compounding returns because you have a group of people inside of a large institution that know it, that have success, like Kevin said, that then feeds the second and the third and the fourth iteration of that growth. We talked to Ranger about how that worked at AT&T when they were there years ago. That is the right approach here to get maximum output of your value, that you have to have the right partner.
If we take that as a model, like Ranger went from, I think, 0 to 15,000 monthly active users in the platform. I forget the number of years that took, but it didn't take a large number of people to achieve it. They only had a small number of Foundry champions who got really good in the platform and then were able to go out and enable the rest of the organization and create more people who were champions to go out and enable more parts of the organization. That seems like a really successful scaling model. And if you were to do that inside every Fortune 500, to both your points, now we start looking at a much bigger market of people who could consume the product. And now we can actually start to see the increase in revenue that's going to drive and the compute usage through all the new apps they build, et cetera. So I think that's a smart model. If we look at that enablement strategy, though, I think they're focused more. It seems like they're focused more right now on the tech fellowship, which is going out and getting blue collar workers to come in and learn the platform. I think this is going to be an and strategy. So I see that as great too. I just think on the corporate enablement side, if we look at the Fortune 500, we need things like, Vercel released an SDK recently to build meetup groups around Vercel. So you can learn Vercel faster in your company. It comes with all these starter things, like something like that for marketplace that could enable the champions to move faster with compelling content, training material, et cetera. I mean, we are living in the age of AI, which is fantastic at teaching you things if you actually build, the right guardrails to allow the AI to teach the person on the other side the subject matter. So this should be an area I think we should see investment from Palantir, because if you can turn every Fortune 500 into an AT&T, I think you can hit the scale that we're talking about in these revenue numbers, like 50 billion in revenue. Another interesting thing we could think about too is you brought up open source. What's interesting there is I think there's this tremendous opportunity to build foundational ontologies that sort of act as an additional accelerator across the industry. Because all the customers in the journey are sort of starting with the same challenges around data integration. And a lot of times they're integrating the same sources. We're starting with SharePoint and OneDrive and Outlook and Teams and, Salesforce and Oracle and all these other things that are in the company. Yeah, exactly. And a lot of these things are common across the industry. So if you think about large SI partners, I think PwC, I think Accenture, Deloitte, EY, if they were to come out with foundational ontologies and the SI teams to hydrate them, that could be an accelerator for companies like ours that then take those foundational ontologies and use them as specs to build against. So we can start building compelling solutions that these enterprises can use, built against foundational ontologies that large SI partners are hydrating for the industry. That becomes, in my opinion, a massive accelerator for value creation. And we all start speaking the same nouns and verbs when we're talking about enterprises, which would be crazy. But I'm interested to get your guys' thoughts on that.
Well, I think on an industry level, a lot of the problems and challenges you face, either with working with the software that you have today or just the business problems specifically in a given industry, in a given domain, are hyper repeatable. Right. In the sense that if you can build a foundational layer where we are speaking about the same nouns and verbs, that you can solve it once, or again, as a group in open source, solve it once and then customize it to get competitive advantage or whatever you're trying to do with it after the fact. But I think you're totally right. If we can get that level of standardization while allowing for customization still, then incumbent service providers can provide SI work. They're still getting paid to do that. Customers are getting over this hump of essentially approaching a platform like Foundry and just rebuilding the whole thing again. Because some customers are totally willing to do that, particularly new ones. But a lot of them are like, hey, I know that other people in my industry have followed this path. Is there anything off the shelf? Well, again, it doesn't have to be a SaaS product managed by a software company. It can be something you essentially deploy, again, through Marketplace. where then you reap the rewards of that tooling and you'd be happy to pay some incremental fee for the agents associated or that can work with that foundational ontology. That I think is a growth lever that would work. But again, I'm really confident here that it has to be industry and domain specific to actually make that work.
Yeah, and I think the question is like what, because you're trying to get to the 80/20 rule. Like everyone, you talk to every enterprise and everyone is their own unique special flower and unicorn, right? But actually it's all very similar, right? And like and so like you said, you're basically trying to toe the line. You're like, hey, in your unique circumstances, how you configure these things, how your processes run. Obviously, it's very unique to you, but the pattern recognition is what we need to get to them faster, right? And it's like the pattern recognition between, hey, this is the department, this is the patterns that are used. It's actually, and it doesn't need to be a big scary thing. It's actually just a very, it can be a simple mapping exercise, right? Like I'm curious, Dorian, because you've been doing this for so long, like how do you articulate to people the how to remove some of those bottlenecks to how, like, what is the path to actually increase the speed of building these foundational ontologies and like and scaling that up? Like what are and how are, and not only like what are the ways to grow that, but like how have you described it to get to people to the aha moment? Because I feel like it took me a while to get there, but I'd love to know.
I mean, we'll start with the aha moment, and then there's some unique technical things that Palantir is building to help accelerate foundational ontology creation. But the aha moment is like, imagine if, your applications all spoke the same language in terms of the data that they consume and the behaviors that the objects can exhibit. Then you can just drop things into an app and it natively knows how to work with it, right? Like that's the thing that us as software engineers and businesses want to see forever, because that is when it allows the technology to be molded to the business, because now your business is represented directly in the fabric of the data. But it also enables the compounding use case and value creation, because instead of having to redefine what a plant or a material or customer looks like and how do I visualize that and how do I trigger a change or an action against it, now every app just natively gets that for free, and you can just piece those Lego blocks together. Imagine how fast you can create value in an organization if, instead of reinventing the wheel on all these hard concepts and actions and behaviors with every freaking piece of software you create, you have this nice Lego block toolkit. And now you just start assembling use cases off of, think of it like a factory. You have a use case factory and your business can actually use it, right? Like your business is part of that building process. They're not sitting on the sidelines waiting for IT to redefine plant for the 50th fucking time. So like, I think at the end of the day, that aha moment is I think the business, it exists within the business already. And it's what they've been trying to get to. You just have to articulate that it's possible. And they're like, oh my God, okay, we can actually.
You're like, really? That's
the other. Yeah, is that right? Yeah, exactly. You show them the ontology. They're like, oh my God, okay, I want that. Like, get me to the ontology. Now on the how do we enable hydration faster? This is a challenging process. To your point, every business is its unique snowflake, especially in how they've configured their enterprise stack. So like when you talk about how OneDrive is deployed within an enterprise, that is different across every enterprise. And it is a royal pain in the ass to integrate these things, because you're dealing with security settings and you're dealing with like issues that are deeply ingrained in the IT risk profile. And so it's a human problem, because you have to like convince people to trust you, to give you access to these things. And then there's also this technical challenge around it where like, oh, the SDK client for OneDrive doesn't work in this particular case because Bob over here has configured this auth workflow, which is unsupported in this version. Now you got to go use this old deprecated version. This is like shit like this. So I don't think those challenges ever go away, which is why you need a large SI partner to manage that at scale. You have to do large program management across an organization to do ontology hydration. Now, if we look at it, the end goal state here is the enterprise ontology foundations, right? If there is an enterprise ontology foundations product that one of these large SIs can sell, the thing that Palantir will help them with is the idea that you can encode an ontology in a set of definitions as code. So like they've invested in ontology as code, which will allow you to hydrate the objects and shapes and behaviors that include the actions, like the functions and API integrations, directly from a bunch of code. There's the Make SDK from Palantir, which is enabling this. That can allow these SIs to rapidly spin up the ontology within Foundry much more quickly and get to the end state in Foundry much more quickly. And really the goal at that point is like, okay, well, I'm going to have a common hydration process of which is 80% complete because these things are like they're unique snowflakes. I have to tweak my data transformation pipelines with each customer. Marketplace helps you there because they can create a marketplace product for each of these hydration processes. That is, when you publish it, you can have two options. One option is as a foundational element, which means the person who installs it can customize it. So they can have this like foundational template, which would assume, the vanilla version of hydrating from these sources. But then the team that's on boots on the ground at the customer doing the SI work can tweak that after it's installed. So Palantir helps you both with defining your ontology, including the behaviors and system integrations in code to hydrate into Foundry, along with the pipes that can then feed it, which can be customized and easily installed through Marketplace. So that's an accelerator over the existing technology by itself. But I still think at the end of the day, the hard work is literally getting those source systems to talk to the ingest system. Once you can connect those things and the ingest system is working and customized to the exact raw data it's bringing in, the actual hydration of the model downstream is easy. That'll happen almost instantly. It's just trying to get to that state where you can connect these systems without a lot of pain, I don't think is achievable. Palantir has also created products to help in this area called HyperAuto, which for supported systems like NetSuite and SAP and Salesforce, they do some AI-enabled automation around hydrating to a target ontology. So that foundational work is there. But again, to your point, every one of these people are snowflakes. That stuff only works partially, at the end of the day. I think you still have to have boots on the ground, and that involves a large program to manage. But the target end state of enterprise foundational ontology, like an enterprise ontology foundations product from the SI partner, would enable rapid scaling and growth, especially if widely adopted, because it'd be a key part of the growth strategy. Oh, you want to adopt Foundry, you want to get to the aha moment of, the use case factory, and I just assemble the Lego blocks in the right order. This is what I've always wanted. If we have a company that invests in the foundational elements based on the common systems that everyone seems to have over and over and over again, that's a massive accelerator because you don't have to go and do, 6 weeks of scoping to figure out that end state, which looks 80% the same across every org, depending on, to your point, Connor, by industry, right? Like by industry, you're going to have this 80% the same enterprise ontology foundation. The SI partners can reach the scale to then turn that into the 100% match for that business and do all the hard, heavy lifting. Then companies like ours can build against the target schemas, right? So like if you have a rich ecosystem of people offering both free and pay applications that are built against that enterprise foundation in specific industries, now there's even more reason for these customers to adopt it because they want to get that amazing app, app community that's out there embedded in their enterprise as well, whether that's Timefold for scheduling or, Vickie for doing enterprise assistance, like whatever it ends up being. There's a lot of these companies launching healthcare logistics. There's healthcare logistics companies that are offering their software through Marketplace. Now this becomes this rich ecosystem of value creation in which every customer wants to plug in. But that foundational ontology element, I think, is the key to unlocking the growth there. But
the question is, who is going to participate? When we talk about large SIs, and we've talked about them before, they're incentivized by a very short return window. So if you're going to drive this type of behavior, not just from open source developers who want to build great things or companies like ours who are building specific software, then you need to incentivize them, and you need to do it across a large swath of individuals. So like if you're going to work with Accenture and they're going to be a channel partner and they're going to buy into this, well, how do they make money right away? The way they do that is by client introductions or an investment in upskilling their people. And so far to date, aside from partner announcements, which we read a couple episodes ago with SAP, which is more for the tech company, with Bain, they have partnerships with KPMG, PwC, Accenture. They announced that one. They then announced another one with Deloitte. Aside from announcements, which can be empty, are they actually teaching these companies, or are the Deloittes of the world getting that paper announcement and then responsible for doing all of the hard work themselves? I don't know. I don't work in Palantir and I don't work at Deloitte, so but I know how they operate. So there has to be an incentivization model in whatever way, whether that's immediate client introductions or them participating in active projects or massive upskilling investments for these channel partners. Otherwise, the organic growth of this, waiting for FOMO for every single channel partner to come to the table, is a much longer journey than it probably needs to be.
Well, and on incentivization, one of the things that you look at as an incentive is the growth in the AI market, which is triggering more spend. So it's like if there's new revenue streams that are opening up in the market, if Palantir can somehow position this such that building foundational ontologies will let you capture them, and I have specific ideas around why that is. But if that's the case, maybe that's the incentive for them to move on attaching themselves to these new revenue streams. Incumbent revenue streams are going to be much harder. And there's a lot, we talked about that on that episode, lots of internal politics around established alliances and revenue streams that exist already. But I think new revenue streams is probably where you align the incentives with these larger incumbents. But Kevin, why don't we get your thoughts, man?
I mean, I just think that even if you set up these channel partnerships, like at the end of the day, there's a big gap in just being a true practitioner. And it's like,
Oh, yeah.
you can't teach it, you have to do, right? And I think that like, I just don't even know how that's going to work. Like, I think that if you're not willing to bring AI engineers and actually do the work, that you're not actually going to be able to figure out how to do it effectively, no matter how much training you do and how much partnership and whatever. And I think that that's why, people like, we exist, and why you guys exist is that there just has to be a cohort of specialized groups that are willing to roll up their sleeves and do the work and kind of pioneer on how to actually bring it to value capture at the end of the day. Because at the end, like, you can everyone can work on another AI initiative, right? But at the end of the day, like, it's going to be a lot of tweaking and a lot of innovation that's required both on the business side, but also on the technical side to actually get it across the finish line. And I don't like even these massive upskilling programs and all this stuff. Like, I like all these things are great, but like, I just feel like if you're actually disadvantaged at being at one of those big shops, because your ability to really dive in and try to build the outcome with your small tiger team or whatever it is that you need to that is actually accountable for getting it across the finish line. They just don't there. I feel like at the bigger shops, you just either don't have that expertise or you don't have the fluidity to be able to actually, you know, dive in
Yeah,
at that level.
Connor and I are living proof that that's the case for sure.
That's all I do.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, like we were at a big shop, and you're right. It's impossible to really innovate and do things that are heretical in any way, that rock the boat, or, and everything's so focused on short-term outcome, revenue this quarter. It's really hard to make investments in a long-term bet and play like what you're talking about, because like, to be good, to be able to obtain quality outcomes in Foundry, especially for something as complicated as a foundational enterprise ontology, you probably need 2 years of hands-on experience implementing it in a large, institution minimum, right? So like, there's this built-in bottleneck to achieving that. And in the interim, I do think you're right. Like but Palantir has FDE resources, and the boutiques have FDE resources that these larger players could use to act as accelerators. We built a whole enablement model around this, but like, the challenge is like convincing those big players to do it. They tend to not like to partner with small companies at the end of the day, from what I've seen. It's like, and in the past, I think they've been more open to it. They've had hundreds of these, joint business relationships with smaller entities in the past. Now there's less appetite for it, because like, we're in challenging times, and managing hundreds of little micro alliances and joint business relations isn't in the cards today. So there are going to be some sort of market forces that work against this, but I do think you're right. Like, you have to find the experts, or you won't get the quality outcome. To get the quality outcome is a two-year minimum, big investments. We're going to be constrained. On that note, let's kind of pivot a little bit. So we've done TAM, SAM, SAW. We sort of are looking at Palantir achieving a $50 billion a year revenue, with a lot of help from partners to scale it. Some challenges there, but like, let's take a look at the AI market, because we did mention, like, all right, we have these incentives, maybe AI starts opening new revenue streams for everyone to go capture. I would like to talk though a little bit about this phenomenon of the focus on the last mile, and that also not only is that in, you know, things like Copilot where people get distracted with that, but I think now it's in agents heavily, you know, and like people are obsessive with this like agent construction of the workflow. Like, you know, I got a visual tool, I'm going to lay out this workflow, and like, oh wow, I've got these LLM decision blocks where the model decides where to go from here, you know, and it can take, you know, path A, B, or C. You know, let's just start. Connor, if you could read off some facts about it. I think it's 8N8 that is got this valuation recently.
Yeah, N8N, and they're out of Germany. Their recent valuation was 1.5 or 1.8 billion, depending on the source you read. And it's essentially an AI agent prototyping tool where you can drop things on canvas. But let's take that as one of how many of these companies exist
There's a
now.
lot.
Many. Even the big consultants are creating their own, which I shudder on.
PwC made Agent OS, I think.
Agent OS, yeah, that's public. I think Deloitte has one too. And but you know, N8N being at a 1.5 or 1.8 billion dollar valuation will put as the leader, at least from a valuation perspective, on visual AI agent building tools.
Kevin, what are your thoughts on that tool? I think you guys use it, right?
Yeah, I've used it a lot. I've used actually a lot of these tools, and there was like it was actually a phenomenon probably a year ago where a lot of these tools actually first started coming out of YC, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of these like YC tools were like, hey, like what if we could visualize the new Zapier or like an AI Zapier, right? And that was the concept. So a few things tying it back to Microsoft. I actually think that Microsoft could have just gone up the stack from their power in Azure and like making a lot of progress there and actually just gone up one level, and they could have just bought N8N and with their unique position, Microsoft's unique position of being able to be connected to the infrastructure and also connected into the tools. What's interesting about N8N is it is a very, I mean, it's an important middle layer for people to start understanding how to define their workflows. And I think that's not just specific to N8N. That's just related to just systems thinking in general. I think one thing about building agents and building agent systems for companies, especially like small to medium sized companies, is that you're you're talking to executives and department heads and leaders who are realizing that the path to scale is not just throwing more bodies at it, and that there actually is a way to have intelligent tools that can actually go farther and do more things. And that's why, you know, there's been a big boom towards agents. But the problem has been is that actually companies don't even know what their workflows are. Like if you talk to most executives, like individual people who are working, managers, you know, individual contributors, whoever is working, they don't actually understand what their workflow is. And so the one thing that I will give N8N and these different tools is that it actually is helping people realize like, wait, if I thought about my day, not as I have to wake up and I come to work and I have my coffee and I have to do these things and I have these tasks and I go to these meetings. But if you actually think about the role that you have and the system and like come from a systems perspective, right? That is a really huge success of these tools like N8N to say, wait, as an individual contributor in the age of AI, I'm actually not an individual contributor anymore. I am actually can be an orchestrator of a system, but I don't even know what my system is, right? And I think that that's like a big aha moment for individuals. And so I think N8N, like for better or for worse or ugly or not, like I think N8N could be the new Microsoft Excel, right? Like Microsoft Excel like powers 70% of businesses, whether it's duct taped together with weird processes, it's still part of core operations. And I think that at the end of the day, like people are going to realize, wait, if I have these tools to start scaling my own work outside of my own manpower, that I think that there's always going to be a place for the ability to give people the ability to make that system for themselves, right?
I haven't used N8N. I was just wondering, like, are you integrating like a lot of company systems into it, like data products and platforms and APIs? Like, do you bring those in as
Yeah. So the helpful thing about N8N, so it has some pros and cons, right? The pros are actually it has a ton of integrations, right? So you can actually connect to, Salesforce, HubSpot, your CRMs, your databases, just you can connect into webhooks. So you can kind of connect into anything. The integrations is very deep. So you can. Um, I think where it fell short is that if you're trying to design an agent system, it falls apart at the complexity of the system, right? So like there are a lot of things and workflows that you need more advanced techniques in order to be able to build robustly, right? And and so
Are we talking about like retrieval augmented generation and model?
yeah, it's very helpful. Well, no, I think it's actually further than that. Like I think it's actually very easy and very good to do RAG in N8N. I think that's actually like, I think of it almost like, if you're trying to build an agent system, you're basically saying, "How can I automate an intelligent workflow?" It's like one step up from Zapier, right? So it's like Zapier, you can connect to stuff, but like in N8N, you get to put agents in the middle that can take these decisions or connect into tools. It does a very good job of, I think, organizing that visually and being able to, connect the dots for people to say, I need, I have a decision tree. My work is actually not that. My work is not that creative. It's actually an obfuscated decision tree that's in my head, right? And it gives you the ability to say, wow, I should probably put that system on a piece of paper. It connects into different things, connects to APIs, and then you can trigger it for different things. So, one of the things that you're talking about is that, the biggest difference between an agentic system versus, like a chatbot is that when you're building a workflow, you don't want to prompt it, right? You don't want to have the
You
input
want it
be
to run automatically and respond.
you want it to listen to things like event listener. This is not new stuff.
Yeah.
It's like you want it to listen to the world and then
That's kind of what I want to unpack here a little bit is like, we've had business process modeling technology forever. We've had eventing, forever to respond to these things with event hubs. But like, so like that to me is not a net new capability. So I would not give, N8N a high valuation just based on the fact that it's undifferentiated in a space that's already saturated as far as workflow modeling goes. And to your point earlier, like businesses don't even know what their workflows are. And that has traditionally been the bottleneck for business process modeling. Like we know a person in Switzerland that's a world-renowned expert in this area, right? And he specializes in VPN. And the problem that he always faces when you go into an enterprise, the people running it have no idea how things actually function. And the way things actually function is very chaotic, disorganized, has no semblance of like a clean process at all. It's often full of feedback loops and weird kind of decisioning and then things that happen, just because a person feels some way one day. It's just like very not clean. And so it's been the traditional bottleneck to business process modeling has been like, how do I actually map a process onto an organization that refuses process? And so you have this natural kickback. And so what I would argue is like the net new capability here is the fact we have this pseudo intelligence that can reason about what to do, right? Like if we look at the fundamental capabilities of like what is net new in this space, we have sort of this ability to do this non-deterministic control flow, reasoning about the next best action based on a set of rules, for example. That's a net new capability. And for language to sort of power these things, because in the past, business process modeling required very structured inputs. So like you actually needed to model the data into a structured format so that you could compute those logic gates so you could figure out like where to go. And today we don't have to compute all of those values as logic gates. We can just feed them to the neural net and let it decide. And therefore we can send unstructured data into the system. So that kind of removes one of the bottlenecks. But in order to do that, the hardest part of this whole freaking thing is like making sure the model has access to the exact right high quality data and information to decision and figure out what the next best action is. I think at the end of the day, though, if I were to lean into what would be required to lean into the strengths of this new software 3.0 stack is like model grounding and data integration, because in order to get the exact right information, you need all of the company's data. So what is the strengths around data integration that these platforms offer that will be differentiated in their capabilities to solve the model grounding problem? I think the other is this idea that rather than needing to define software ahead of time, the branches and pathways to explore, the model could figure out at runtime based on rules So that actually, and what's neat about that is it actually lends itself to the model becoming an actor in the chaos, right? Like you could inject these agents into the chaotic decision that's already existing in your organization, let it run in a simulated environment and give it feedback to see like, well, it decided it was going to go take a nap for 15 minutes. That's not a good outcome. Like no, bad decision, and let it just interact in the system in a virtual environment for a while, making these decisions and giving it constant feedback to the point where it becomes a player in that chaos and can actually just navigate it natively. But again, to do that, you need to see point number one around system integration, data integration, being able to have a large scale platform that will let you bring in every piece of data. And I mean, all of it: emails, chat messages, meeting transcripts, all of the structured sources, all of the unstructured sources, the documents, everything. Right. And to my mind, that is the space where the big players are investing. And these are the big AI companies. These are the Databrickses, the Palantirs, the Snowflakes, the Azures, the AWSs. They're all trying to win in this, AI platform space. And they all know that data integration's it. And I honestly believe 8 and 8 is a complete distraction from the real problem, which is like, how do I do large scale data integration? And then how do I create a space in which that can happen securely? Like what that can happen, meaning like a model could sit there and reason about the next best action and become an actor in the systems and processes. That has to be done securely as well. So there's this challenge around security that is very difficult to solve if you haven't designed your system that way. So that's a long way of saying I think like a lot of these workflow modeling tools are undifferentiated. And if you really look at their product roadmap, what you're going to see is a 10-year, $2 billion investment in trying to recreate Foundry rather than, large scale investments in better modeling techniques. Because that's also a solved problem. Like business, again, C point about business process modeling being very saturated in a solved domain. So the real space of innovation here, in my opinion, is like around data platform and integration, security, all the things that were already in Foundry that are now like way more valuable because we have AI.
I worry a bit about like smaller companies and medium-sized companies who are just like, we need to have something. Copilot failure. Now we're going to go on this business process modeling with some level of RAG, with some level of um, LLM transitions, and we're going to build up that, and we're going to end up where we were with robotic process automation, which is basically a tangled web with millions and billions of dollars injected into it that then are impossible to unwind. So you just have to deprecate it all. That'll have a material impact on smaller businesses if they follow that route again. So like, what does a small company do? Do they continue waiting till it's something that's digestible for them to start? Or do they just go by Foundry? But some of them probably can't. So like, what do they do?
Have to factor into that analysis though. We have some research here on the state of AI adoption in the enterprise. And I know that doesn't apply to small and medium-sized businesses, but they are a good leading indicator of the challenges those small businesses are going to face when they go to implement something, right? Like, we must do something. 8 and 8 is something, therefore we must use 8 and 8. Like that's the kind of thinking that we're talking about. The challenge there is like you're actually going to hit the same wall that all these enterprise customers are hitting. I think we have some research here that we can share, which is just like one of the biggest issues that they're experiencing in enterprise is the data variety and quality issues, which lead to this trust deficit in the AI agents. It's like it's something like only like 2% of organizations have fully scaled deployments. And a lot of that is because there's this trust deficit that comes into play when the data's shit and the agent then sucks. And then they go, well, this isn't working for me. Why am I going to continue to do this? There's also, issues around internal friction and workforce readiness, right? Like some people don't want to use it. It could be the fallout from their Copilot experience, or it could be like some other thing that, they don't want it, or there's the perception that their job is being taken away. And I think that like all of these institutions, whether they're big or small, are going to experience some flavor of this. So back to your point, Connor, about like, we must do something. 8 and 8 is something, therefore we must use 8 and 8, like, or some products. How do you then get organizations big and small to think about the challenges they're going to face?
I think that there's like a bit of a segmentation, like that's required for this conversation, because like if you are if you do under 100 million in revenue, if you have less than 500 employees, that's 99% of American businesses, right? And if you are one of those companies, you typically use like the normal software stack, right? Like you might use a HubSpot. Like you actually don't. You have a much simpler implementation. And so I think that the value of an N8N is that you're essentially just enabling you're enabling access to a technology like in a workflow in something that can be spun up in a very short amount of time. And I think what it actually, and going to kind of like the concept of this, one of the main themes of this discussion that we want to talk about is like going from pilot to production. I think it's actually helpful to say, wait a minute, the purpose of a pilot is to get the requirements down and like to get people get people thinking in a new way and to get people to a high ROI with a low cost in a short amount of time. And I think that these tools are actually very good at doing that. Now, if you call it a spade, if you say it's actually not scoped to do anything that's very risky, it's not scoped to do anything that's supposed to be, then you're at least having a level of maturity that's required to make sure that you're not overselling. And that's the biggest problem in N8N in this space, is that everyone is overselling. Everyone is basically saying, I have an AI agent that printed me hundreds of thousands of dollars. And what they're really doing is, implementing it in a way that, is not compliant because they're spamming people and reaching out to people or like, whatever it is.
They're over promising because there's 3 really hard problems to solve, which is model grounding is hard. To get the right answer to a question, I need to give the model the exact right data. And that means I need all of my data. I need every bit of it that I can possibly get. So if a model can have access to the same context I do when I make decisions, right? The other is security. How do you let the model securely access data? And there are legitimate privacy concerns around that. Some are legal and you must meet them. Others are, your employees are going to get pissed, or you're not going to have a successful business. And the other is cost. Because it's not free to run these things. I mean, I'm seeing software engineers rack up $7,000 a month bills in code generation utilities, so it's like these things aren't cheap. And so like these 3 fundamental pillars are the ones that are always overlooked. And I always feel are hiding just beneath the surface of the AI, roadmap for these companies. And they're only focused on the last mile shiny object of workflow automation. And they get excited about that when they really should be getting excited about the other 3 things and like how you're going to solve for those.
Well, let me throw some stats at you here, because I think what this is going to do is have a massive climb, and we're going to crest to where like everyone's using AI maybe in the wrong way, and it's all going to fall over. McKinsey reports that we've gone from 33% of business functions using at least one business function. 33% of businesses are using it in 2023, up to 71%. So 3/4 of all businesses have at least one business function. Reuters has something analogous where they just polled the individual contributors or the business employees, where you have about 3/4 of people using at least one agent tool. PwC paints a bit more of a muted trend, with less than a third of CEOs strategically integrating AI into workforce and skills. So there you have a kind of a mismatch of like individual contributors are just saying, screw it, we're not going to wait for the top. We're just going to start using this stuff, which probably compounds the problem.
And that's reflective of reality, I can tell you that right now.
And then last one is Axios reported 94% of C-suite execs are not satisfied with their current AI progress, which is funny because then you have them not injecting it or making it strategic in nature. So you have a bunch of people that are just picking up tools now on their own, not focused on the fundamental 3 things they need to actually scale it. You have a bunch of businesses, nearly 3/4 of all of them, having it at least one area with the expectation that it's going to go to more business areas. So if people aren't actually addressing the real challenges here, and everyone's building a bunch of N8N agents and people are building other tools or using off-the-shelf capability, you're going to have a real problem here. You're going to have a mountain of really poorly constructed tech debt that's going to fall over and probably cause massive ramifications inside individual business functions or the entire business itself. So I think when you have something on this that you can look at where people are having success addressing those 3 issues with Foundry and AIP, I think what's going to happen here is that crest is going to happen, a lot of turmoil, and then people are going to look, where were people having success where those 3 things were addressed? And it could be a massive boon to Palantir.
Yeah, I think what it's exposing, right, is that this AI adoption is exposing bad strategy, right? Because at the end of the day, like if you are gonna just build like a little agent or whatever, and you're gonna be able to accelerate very quickly towards towards down the wrong road, right? And now that's being, felt by people saying they're not happy with it, right? But I think that is actually it's actually a look in the mirror to say it's not actually about any of these tools. It's not that it's about the fact that you aren't actually being smart about how you and what I'm learning from talking to most people is the most value of trying to help define like what is an AI roadmap and what you should do is actually about sizing. Like, how do you size the right size project? How do you size the right size workflow? How do you match the execution that is required with the risk that is required that comes with that size of a project? And how do you do that in a bite size that can be a win-win-win? I think that's the whole point of a pilot, right? Is to figure out like what is something that is a high ROI in a contained environment, right? In a way that you can ensure that, uh, you know, that this thing that I did today, this project that I did today is something that is going to build onto the next project that I'm going to do tomorrow. And that's how you build an AI roadmap. It's like from one step to the next, to the next, to the next, to
Agreed.
the next.
So,
And I think that most people are sizing it all wrong. And so, when I think of like, how do you like what is a good pilot, right? Like, well, how do you even define a good pilot? Like, how do you even know what the first start is? Like, I think you have to take a painful process, right? Step one, you have to define it such that it has low compliance risk because you don't want to take on something that's very risky to start. And ideally, you want to take on that process in a way that you can run it like an A/B test, right? Meaning, like, you don't actually need change management for the success of the pilot, that you can actually implement this pilot side by side with an existing workflow to see to just see, is it better or is it not better? Right? And I think that most people, size that wrong, and they don't use that prioritization criteria in order to start an AI project, which is why, like you said, most of them don't ever make it to production. Well, most of them don't even succeed in scoping the pilot, right? Forget production. Like they didn't even size the pilot. And I think that in the age of like, these tools and like these different techniques of how you can build RAG and you can do all these different things, like I have found the success of working with the companies that, I've been working with is that I kind of use this 3-3-3 rule, right? Like, if you can define the requirements in 3 days, and you can have a proof of concept in 3 weeks, and you can have a proof of value that's demonstrable and quantifiable value within 3 months, that's probably the right size for a project. Now, if that's at a bigger company, then you can do that. You can take on many at the same time. You can do it across different departments or whatever, but no team or project in my opinion, should be scoped bigger than that. You can string together many if you want, if you need to go faster. But I just think that you need to have rapid iteration for this to be successful.
The enterprise flavor of what you're describing is very much, it's very similar. I think the way you would position it is like, go to the CFO and ask the CFO, give me your biggest pain points around what the CIO is doing for you. And it'll probably be something around data, because CFO needs data to do their job effectively and to allocate capital and know how the business is functioning. So they'll probably tell you something like, well, the CIO's data is shit and I've been waiting 3 years on the same reports and I'm just not getting them, right? So like you could size a pilot around that and say, well, okay, how about if I could give you your data and I could show you how AI could assist you in exploring it and understanding it, and I could do it in a day, right? And if you can deliver on that, every CFO in the country should sign up for a pilot to do that. And I think Palantir has demonstrated this through their boot camps, that they can do the heavy lifting around data integration in a day inside boot camps that they've been literally, these CFOs have been waiting years for. You're getting in a day from Palantir. And I think that's how you size the pilot, is you go to the business and you at the enterprise level and you ask the business, what are the key things that the CIO has been failing to deliver and that you need today? You scale a pilot around that. And the last mile of the AI workflows are more centered around insight and action. Like, because the traditional dashboard, Palantir is a great way of describing this. I think it's Chad. Like, dashboards are a great way to stare at your problems, but you actually want some actionability and insight to do something about them. showing within the pilot of how AI can be helpful in providing additional workforce capability to get you to a faster outcome, I think is how you would size that. And I don't think there's limitations around the complexity of the process as much as there's limitations around how software can integrate into people's existing process. Foundry is very good at doing this. Foundry can meet, factory line workers on the floor. They can meet field operators in the field. And because if you build the ontology correctly, that is the thing you're integrating and modeling, the state you're modeling all the data into and the behaviors, you can actually like provide software that complements these field operations in addition to the people who are sitting at the desk. So I don't think there's a true complexity limit in Foundry for the process you bite off. It's more like, think about the value you want delivered, CFO. We'll do it in a day, and we'll show you what's possible when you use AI correctly. And I almost think it's like, if we rephrase this, because like a lot of these, Connor, your point about the CEOs who are hesitant to adopt anything, they're all sitting there kind of on the fence. If we reframe this being like, no, stop using the word AI. Let's just call it software 3.0. There's this new set of capabilities in the software stack that have emerged. And that's really what we're talking about when we talk about AI. They're around this ability to use programmable neural nets. What is that? It just means we have this general purpose tool that at runtime with using natural language, you can teach it what to do. That's very different than a programmer who used to have to write code to spit out computed behaviors in the past, right? And now it's like programmable thing that you can send natural language to at runtime, and it spits out a program, executes it, and sends you back the results as natural language or an image or whatever it's going to be. Well, that's a capability. And so what's that good for? Well, 90% of the problems you've had with other software stacks that have fallen down have been on the rigidity of what it can compute. You have all these rules that are encoded in very rigid if then else statements. The capability today is now we can have our software explore way more paths. And instead of you having to go and fill out a form for every fucking thing you want to go input into the system, whether that's your email address or what time you want to schedule a meeting or, n number of other forms you're filling out on a daily basis to interact with software, you can now just talk to it, right? Those are the two fundamental things. That's software 3.0. Think about how that could like reform your software stack to a point where you reduce complexity, you can move faster, you can like build workflows that are no longer where I need to enter every piece of data. I could passively collect data in the ontology, for example, and let the AI figure out what to put into the system call, I think that would work better because then it's like a much more concrete definition of what we're talking about, number one. And number two, you can start to form better use case definitions in your head about leaning into the strengths of what software 3.0 is versus these pie in the fucking sky things that people are coming up with, right? Let's like, no. That's not what we're talking about here. Let's just go back to first principles, what we're actually talking about, and then think about how we lean into the strengths of software 3.0. I think that would help the CEOs with their leadership teams decide where this new set of capabilities would be best applied in their existing software stack. I think that's like the key thing to think about is like, oh, it's really a new set of capabilities we can apply in the existing stack. And yeah, it's maybe we're bringing in something new like Palantir to run these things, but we're still leveraging a lot of the same skills and capabilities. We're just augmenting them with this new programmable neural net that didn't exist before. And that way you get, when you're crafting your pilot, you get a better outcome.
Well, the way I kind of receive what you just said about like this programmable neural net that these software 3.0 capabilities, what kind of makes me think of is that you now have the ability to just throw more bodies at the problem, right? Like a business has problems. You need to sell things, you need to process things, you need to operate things in different ways. And your current situation is that you can throw bodies at it and everybody has 100 IQ, right? And if you have you have 10 employees at 100 IQ, you got 1,000 units of people throwing intelligence at a problem, right? And the traditional way is like you want to if you want more problem solving, you can make them work 80-hour work weeks, like investment banking in New York or whatever it is, right? You can just like throw more hours at it, or you can throw more people at it. And software 3.0 just allows you to just add more intelligence towards your problem solving in whatever.
It opens up the aperture in how quickly you can build and ship a solution, and like what skill sets are involved, because if you think about it, the programmable neural net needs a subject matter expert to talk to it. Like, you can't have an engineer sit down and actually describe how you're going to do demand planning, for this company with a software engineer writing the prompts. Like, that's not going to work, right?
It's not going to
So
work.
but we're opening up the aperture to subject matter experts now who can come in and write part of the code, which is the language inputs and output and dealing with the outputs, assessing the outputs. So like now that is opened up, but you can only do that if you have a platform that's designed for that, and like almost all the software stacks today are designed for one persona. It's like the software engineer. Very few of them are designed now to bring in the subject matter experts, with the exception of Palantir. I think Palantir is a shining example of the kinds of things you need when now you need to bring subject matter experts in to contribute to software stacks and builds. But that's like one key thing that's happened. And to your point, it's going to open up what your workforce is actually capable of doing, the problems they can actually solve. Because now, instead of, I had 10 people and they're subject matter experts in demand planning and forecasting, but they can only move at the speed the engineering team could solve problems for them. Well, if they now have this capability with programmable neural nets, and then there's a company like Palantir that's figuring out how do they make the outputs coming out of the neural net actionable, we solve that with a foundational ontology. Well, now those 10 people can actually build end-to-end solutions that solve real problems for the business. But that's only made possible by the 10 years and $2 billion that Palantir spent building Foundry before AI was even a discussion point about any of this stuff, And I think that to have a successful pilot, you need these preconditions of like framing the problem correctly, starts with value creation for the business, understanding the capabilities that are now net new and what that translates to, and to now how the use cases can change and where those would best be applied in the business. But number three, the most important one, is that you have a platform that can integrate data at scale, secure it, and allow you to open up the aperture to the new profile of the development teams, which include non-coding entities. We have a lot of in fact, that's going to be the majority of the team. That's going to be, and I think that's the majority of the team now, are the non-coding
business operators who can speak the language of the business in language. That's
right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay.
Everything is gonna move to this language interface, and you need subject matter expertise to make sure that the model is A, being fed the best description of the problem to be solved, and B, can judge the outputs effectively, because these things, one of the other characteristics of software 3.0 is that it's fallible. There's a baked-in error rate. These are non-deterministic systems, meaning given the same input, you can get different output. That is a feature, not a bug, of software 3.0. And the most effective way, well, not the only way, but the most effective way around it right now is to gate certain actions and things that happen within the system by human review. But the people doing that review are going to have to be subject matter experts. You can't just have some rando going in there.
Well, that will expose, but that will expose the people within organizations that are not true experts, right?
Oh, hell yeah.
And that's actually
you could definitely trim the fat pretty quick.
Yeah, well, I was talking to this with someone else, and I was like, I actually don't think that this is like from at least the conversations I've had, I haven't seen this as a huge moment for like mass layoffs, and that's like all this thing about like the AI is going to bring layoffs. I actually think it's a great rotation. It's going to be people who can think in systems and who are truly experts are going to thrive, and any business who has those subject matter experts are going to want more of them. There just might be a limited amount of them, but it will expose the people who are not, right? And I think that those are the people who are not safe. So I 100% agree. I think it's a different software 3.0 it's a different leverage point. It's not about it's actually getting all these individual people who have a unique way of solving that problem, which is the unique differentiator for that organization, who's competing against those peers. Can they leverage these language models, these tools, these agentic workflows, whatever? Can they leverage their unique expertise? But if they don't have the expertise and they're not, they're just hanging out at the corporate, in the corporate world, then it's gonna expose that pretty quickly.
I wish I could set you in front of a CEO. Hopefully there's going to be some CEOs watching this and say just that, because a smart one's going to realize that if I can get there first and I can reshape my workforce and go out and poach the subject matter experts, my competitors are going to be a serious disadvantage. Because really, to amplify the maximal value out of software 3.0, You want to corner the market on the absolute best SMEs and get rid
That's
of
what
the
you want.
rollers fast.
Yeah, and you want that, and it's actually going to be high in race, and then like, and going back to what I was saying around, like, if you think about it as pumping compute, or you're just pumping intelligence into your problems, right? And
right.
you, before AI, you were constrained at the amount of intelligence by people, right? But now
You
you
were
have this
constrained how we encoded it, right? Like the way we encoded intelligence is
exactly,
much more painful. It's like a series of logic gates. Now it's
exactly.
just language.
Now you can use language, and now you can say, okay, every single one of those 10 subject matter experts, whether they're in the sales department or whether they're in the specialty product or service or whether in the supply chain or whatever area within the business that they're in, um, those experts now, it's a function of, are they able to apply more intelligence into that business unit's problems or not? And if you have people who aren't applying AI, then their amount of intelligence is their IQ. It's 100. That's how much is going into the problems. But if you have these people who are truly empowered with these systems and using, these tools, that these business tools, like you said, in Palantir, where you can actually interface with the logic of that's in your head around your business process, and you can actually use that to inform and actually build these new ways of doing business faster, that you could take that compute, which I did this calculation the other day, like a human with an IQ is something like 16,000 tokens or something, right? So you could actually just think that a human is 16,000. If a human's effort is 16,000, if that human is sitting on Foundry or sitting on AIP and they're running all these jobs, right? And you could actually calculate the number of tokens that they're actually generating. That could be 2-3 humans very quickly.
Yeah. No, if we get meta about it and we put formal definitions around it, what we could say is that we have precedents for this in the past. A good example of computed intelligence would be knowledge graphs. Like knowledge graphs by themselves can exhibit human-like intelligence or intelligent-like characteristics because they themselves encode human understanding about objects and how they relate and what they do, right? And you've seen this in recommendation engines, how it can exhibit intelligent-like behavior recommending products to you. Knowledge graphs have been a way people have solved this problem in the past. Now, if we extend that to now this idea that, like, okay, I can bring together all of the information about my business's state. I can give it behaviors through encoding things like actions in the ontology. But now I can also encode the intelligence of my workforce in prompts and AIP logic agents, all exposed in a common ontology. That is by definition a digital twin, a sort of approximation of how your organization behaves and thinks and the state that it's in. That is a machine processable form of the real world, which is extremely useful. In fact, this idea that we can get to a digital twin and run simulations against it and understand what will happen if I do X, what will happen if I do Y, is really where the business wants to get at the end of the day, predictive and prescriptive. And that's where we've been stubbing our toe. But I think now you need a platform that can create this digital twin, let's call it an ontology. And you need to get busy getting your workforce to encode their understanding about the world, their unique subject matter expertise into it. Because when you do, with these new neural nets, you have a machine processable form that can be computed now. And that is going to unlock prescriptive, predictive capabilities we've never seen before.
But
I
if
think
you go down that route, that's on the input side. Then actually, the job to be done is actually removing the humans on the action side. So if you have that second brain, you actually just are gating it with the decisions and actions that you want to allow that thing to do, and that's what the experts or that human in the loop is doing. You want to actually,
they're not just gating, right? They're programming one neural net to understand, they're informing, and that's in the training data and feedback loops, right? So like it's not just that I reject the action too, it's also I'm describing why the action was rejected, which is again encoding human understanding
sure,
into a machine processable form, which the input is natural language, but the machine processable form is the neural net, right? We create those tokens, we send them through the neural net, and it does its thing. And out the other end comes a plausible answer to a high value question, right? A plausible
yeah.
final answer.
And but as that gets better, right? Then you're actually hoping that the human intervention, like the output metric, is the less human actions and human interventions over time.
I disagree with that. I don't think we're ever going to get to a point with the current technology where you can go hands free even on fairly low level decisions. For example, I'll tell you right now, our executive assistant has to, like, when I ask her to schedule a meeting, I have to review the task list she's created, because 1 in 10 times she gets the wrong person, and so I have to be able to edit that person out and put in the correct person. And that's just a low level thing, like sending the wrong meeting invite, like I think that the error rates will not substantially decrease even with engineering. Let's say we get it down to 1 in 100 times, right? It's an order of magnitude different than, in a step down in the error rate from where I'm at today. I still wouldn't go hands-free. I still would want to review the task list, because even 1 in 100 times inviting the wrong person makes my AI look bad, and I don't want to do that as a business, so like, I think there's always going to be a human in the loop gating function until we get to like fund. The problem with our current architectures is they can't effectively retain memory and understand, change their behavior based on that, not without extreme amounts of fine tuning. And that is going to be a fundamental limitation for a long time, which means that like when you explain to the model why something's wrong and then it gets it right, the next time you go talk to the model, it doesn't retain that information. Not unless you're trying to put that in the context window, And so, my point is, they don't learn. Whereas an employee learns. When you teach a human being, like, no, I wasn't talking about that Connor. This is the Connor I was talking about. That error goes away forever. I don't typically ever see that error again. Or if it happens, it's like once in a blue moon because they fat fingered on the keyboard, not because they didn't know the Connor I was trying to get to. So like this inability for these things to actually retain knowledge and learn from feedback will be a fundamental limitation to where I think human gating will always be required, in my opinion.
Well, thanks, guys. Today we covered a recap of Palantir Q2 2025 earnings and the state of AI in enterprises, big and small, going from pilot to production, what Software 3.0 means for the business, and everything we're seeing in the field. Thank you, Kevin, for your time. Future episodes coming, more and more guests of partners, customers, content creators, Palantir, other tech companies, you name it. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.